Alright, sorry about missing last week's video again. It was Laser Rush Reloaded launch and also Thanksgiving, so I was busy. Anyway, but today we're talking about Remnant 2, and I've been meaning to cover this game for quite a while, but there's been a lot of new stuff I've been trying to cover. Anyway, into the game. In some ways, you could say that this is more the same sequel like BioShock 2 or Dishonored 2. The thing with that is that this is the best, more the same sequel ever. Everything from the last game has been significantly improved, especially the bosses. More on that later. Before we get into the rest of the video, I'd like to mention that my Steam game, Laser Rush Reloaded, is available to play right now. Shoot, climb, slash, dash, jump, slide, and ride into the most intense roller coaster of a movement shooter platformer that you've ever played. Experience challenging, chaotic combat and high-stakes platforming at the same time. Fight at top speed and laser rush. Also, I want to make sure the game is as good as possible. Any feedback is greatly appreciated. You can do so in the Steam Community Hub or wherever else. The gunplay is still some of the best shooting in all games, with a smooth and snappy feel. The grafting of a Souls-like dodge onto a third-person shooter is still really good and blends really well. Melee is still kind of an afterthought, but they do have a better variety of melee weapons this time. As for guns, they're still decent variety, and they feel distinct and different, but it does feel like more of them are hidden behind puzzles and secrets. The puzzles in this game are fairly good though, but with how exciting the action is, it's hard to stop it for how long some of these puzzles take. They've also added the ability to horizontally jump off ledges, which adds a lot more than you think to the gameplay. The mods, which are special attacks and buffs attached to your gun, are even better this time and fun to use. Although, that being said, I'm always drawn back to the fire buff. The equipment system is improved. The buffs from rings and stuff like that feel more significant, and there feels like there's a lot more opportunity for a variety of builds. The trait system is fairly similar to the last one, where you do stuff to get a trait, and then you can pump levels into that trait to level it up. That's good. And I think this time there are more sort of secret traits you can unlock by doing quests. The archetypes, which are classes with different abilities, have a much bigger impact this time, and they're really fun. The perks and powers, like the dog and rapid fire ability, add a lot. I do have to say that I only used Gunslinger and Dog because I like them so much. Also, the sub-archetype system is explained pretty poorly, so you'll probably have to look that up. Another thing about the archetypes is that this time there's a lot of secret ones that you can get, so that's fun to find. There's still good enemy variety, which any Souls-like needs. As I said in the intro, the bosses are a massive improvement from Remnant 1. They're not just good, they're some of the best and most unique bosses in all of Souls and Souls-likes. I really like the creativity. There's this one where you're fighting this giant robot eye, and he raises and lowers different sections of the floor in his arena. There's one that's like a parasite that jumps between hosts. There's one where you have these bunch of cubes and they're rolling around in different patterns in the arena. And the final boss has a really cool gimmick in his second phase that I'm not going to spoil. And the more straightforward bosses don't slouch either. There are a ton of really fun ones. They work in the dodge and tough patterns really well. It's crazy how many bosses I would immediately die to, and the pattern would look impossible, but by the end of it I could see through it so well. That being said, sometimes bosses would pull out a really hard move on their last chunk of health, which was annoying. One thing they improved is that there's a lot less reliance on ads in the boss room, which is good. One thing I didn't like in the first game was how they take a mini boss and give him a big health bar and call him a boss. They still do that, but they're inside the regular levels this time. But they also do a better version of this where they take a mini boss, but they add stuff to him. One example is like there's this big blob enemy that's a mini boss, but when they turn him into a boss, they give him this move where he can roll around like a boulder in circles around the arena. There's also encounters that occasionally take the place of bosses. There's simple horde survival situations, but there's also a lot more unique stuff. There's this one where you're at this guy's dinner banquet and you're cursed to have constantly draining health unless you go eat these plates of food on his table, and all that while you're trying to fight off a horde of enemies. There's also one where you're on this futuristic train and you have to fight your way to the front of the train to stop it before it crashes. Those are really fun. I also like how you still can sometimes have conversations with the boss before you fight them. The structural level design is also better. It has more verticality and is more engaging. There's also much less structural bits that get repeated and poorly rationalized barriers. More budget probably helped a lot with that stuff. And while I'm talking up the level design, there's one part I want to mention that's really good is where you're scaling this clock tower and shooting gargoyles off ledges. It was a really super fun moment and probably the best action meets horror bit in all of gaming outside of the Werewolf Fortress and RE8. A lot was made of this game's replayability and the marketing, but it basically boils down to is that there's two versions of the three main worlds, and you'll randomly spawn with one of them. And since I don't really replay games, for me it means that playing drop-in co-op is a lot more fun and interesting, so I ended up doing that a lot. Co-op in this game is really fun, but I will say it's definitely not mandatory. Now let's get into the story. The story is a relatively simple one that's alright. That being said, the sub-stories having to do with the three main worlds are a bit more engaging. The world building is still really good, helping to enrich the world hopping adventure you're on. The environments are still really good. We get to see Yesha again, which was the shortest world in the first one. So it makes sense that would be the one that returns with its fun jungle temples and retconned in floating islands. Naruto is a really fun sci-fi world with really cool dusky and rocky plains and that hold entrances into these Metroid-esque dungeons. Losum is my favorite world because it's Bloodborne, with its great old-timey haunted Victorian streets and castles. I also like how there's all this earth this time, and how we also get to see more of the labyrinth. There's still really good enemy and boss design. There's really good music. There's a lot of Souls-style songs and some 80s sci-fi sounding stuff. On top of all this, the Awakened King DLC is out now, which is pretty much a third version of Losum. It adds some new enemy types, but I think it only has one boss that isn't an enhanced mini-boss. But as I said, the enhanced mini-bosses are good. Overall, this is a great game, even if it's mostly just refining what was in the first one. If the first game was Destiny 1, considering that I like Destiny 1 more than a lot of people, then this is the Taken King expansion. This is where the vision of the first one has been fully realized. So I'm giving it a 9.24. Thank you to anyone that likes, comments, or subscribes. That's it.